Hey everyone, welcome back to Deeper Roots. Our body has many needs, and all those needs can be categorized into 3 sections: the spiritual, the mental, and the physical. When any of those systems in our being are out of commission, we will tend to need external help. For some, it could be church, others a therapist or a doctor, but no matter where you go, there is this new pressure from influencers to professionals alike to start using other substances to supplement your mental health. No, we're not talking about the abuse of those substances like marijuana or psychedelics, but we're talking about instead the prescription of those substances by legitimate and solution-driven doctors. Our listener asks, should a Christian consider drug-assisted therapy? Do you have a question or a topic? We'd love to talk about it. Submit it to www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots so you can be a part of the next episode. Also, you can catch the rest of our episodes in the other platforms that we're streaming on. Thank you for joining us here on Deeper Roots. Let's get to the conversation. Everyone, welcome back to Deeper Roots. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Today, we have myself, we have Pastor Luis, and we also have Esther. It's been a little while since we last recorded, but hopefully we can get right back into it. Today, we have a new question that was submitted by one of our anonymous listeners. Thank you for submitting your question. And before we read the question, if you want to submit your own question to Deeper Roots, we would love to hear it. You can submit it at www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots. There you can also find the places where we stream, and also you can find the other episodes that we have. But for now, the question that was submitted was, should a Christian consider drug-assisted therapy? And the person clarifies, especially if controlled and regulated, is it okay if a Christian takes psychedelics or marijuana if it's a part of a therapeutic healing process? Pastor, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. It's a good day when we actually get a question. So we want to thank our listener for this question and also for participating in Deeper Roots. So this question is going to be a little challenging, I'm guessing, because we have to sort of clarify really, and there's a lot there, because when I first read the main question, you're thinking like maybe like CBD pills or whatever, stuff like that. Some of those things are hitting the market as far as non-prescription, and there's some that are actually prescribed. And then we hit something else which is actually not on the market as far as legally, at least here in California. In some states, it just passed legally, but it's still in a phase where it's not in the medical community. It's more in the what we would call psychiatric or psychology realm, not so much the medical, which is more like the psychedelics and stuff like that. So I think we sort of have to go through those one by one and sort of just talk about what the Bible would have to say about those. So what do you understand by the question, Esther? We have Esther here, we have Derek, so let's hear what you have to say as far as your opening thoughts on this question.
I mean, my first question was, what's the definition of that? But I guess, being in California and being around in the city, marijuana definitely comes to mind of that question. I think you already mentioned CBD. So my initial thought is the definition of it, because then we can break down, biblically what that means. I also think the other question I might be having is, I think they said, I'm not sure if they did say this, but like if they're in chronic pain, is it physical pain or is it a mental health situation? And I think that's another clarity that I need to be able to dive in and what the Bible says and then my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the first things that we need to establish with this question. The drug-assisted therapy, I think it can be split up between two places, like into two halves, but it makes up 2/3 of what you've called like the pyramid, like the pyramid of needs, at least in the church. To review that, the first need is is spiritual. Second need would be mental. Third need would be physical. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's the physical realm, which is the top of the pyramid. Then the middle one we would call more like the inner man, what we would call the spirit and the mental. They're emotional and mental, that part of us that is inside, but we can't really touch or see. And then there's the spiritual, which is also a different area. But that's the most important part, because that from hence it comes all the healing or the well-being of the other areas too, that at least has a big influence on it. And
I think that, so there's definitely there's going to be a difference between the physical needs and the mental needs. And obviously, like, they all are going to affect each other. Like, someone can be in such a rough mind state that their physical health starts deteriorating. And that's a real problem that we have seen many times in the real world. But we obviously need to just start talking about how prescribed, let's talk about prescribed drugs, how they will affect every part of that pyramid.
Let's just start about who prescribes. I guess there's, like you said, there's the two areas. There's the doctors, and then there's the psychiatric doctors, or say the psychiatrists that are able to prescribe things for the mental. When it comes to anything that's prescribed, as far as the medical area, where it comes to something with your body, something that is being, like the listener said, regulated by your doctor, being supervised by your doctor, of course, as long as it's something that has been studied. Thankfully we still live in a country where there is thoroughness as far as the studies that are done to drugs and stuff like that. And even so, when you see the commercials for FDA approved drugs, as they said, try this, but then all these other things can go wrong too. So it's like, but even though, like, if you're talking about whether it's okay as a Christian for you to be able to take something under the supervision of your medical doctor, your body, who's taking care of a physical issue with your body, pain. When I was in the ER with the pain in my gallbladder, I remember it's like they gave me all these different drugs and did nothing until they finally gave me morphine, and I'm like, oh, thank God there's morphine, because it actually helped, and it's not something you want to take. It's not something I want to be dependent on. But it is thankfully there for the moments where you actually need that pain to be killed, to be able to control the pain, in what you're in. So, if you're going through a physical pain, usually the goal of any doctor would be healing, right? And so is this, should the mindset of the person seeking that help, right? So if something is being prescribed to you, hopefully to be able to get you to a point where you can live without it. My fear today is that sometimes people ask this question, and I'm not saying that for our listener, but I've heard it from other people, more for as just to rationalize being able to have drug use, right, and be able to be dependent on something. And that's, if we're not talking about dependent something, is we're talking about being able to deal with a certain condition physically. First, we're talking, there's nothing wrong, even if the doctors come to give you a CBD pill. But it's just that part that helps you to be able to heal. Today, we have to be very clear that there is those CBD pills that have the I forget, it's called THD or something like that, which is the actual THC, which has the mental part of it, and then there's some that are not. For example, there's the cream that they sell, and it's something Hempvana, I think. It has no THC, so it's just the properties that actually help you feel less pain in your joints and everything, so there's nothing wrong with that as well. But it's just making sure that your motivation behind it is not something that's just wanting to become dependent on it. Well, what if you have a chronic condition physically? Well, that's also, again, if it's something prescribed, if it's something that is being monitored through your doctor, it's something that you can live without it actually changing who you are and everything. That's something I would say, first of all, pray about it and make sure you're at peace with using that. And because there's a couple of verses we have to consider, and let me see if I can find them here for you. And it says in 1 Corinthians 6:12, it says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. all things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. And I think that's our goal as Christians, is not to be dominated by something. And even there, we can argue with coffee use, right? To that we have to be careful that to be dominated to a point that we can't live without it. But it's just something that we can use and still control. So let's continue in that realm as far as the physical. Any questions or follow-up questions? We're going to hit the whole mental health, the emotional later, but let's try to talk about this one first.
One of the things that I'm just curious about is mainly the controversy behind a lot of these drugs, because undoubtedly it affects the perception of the way that these drugs are seen by the church. Mm-hmm. We can take into an example of I have a third example, and I'll bring that up after we talk about this one, but it would be marijuana versus alcohol, right? Like in our church, obviously we have a very specific stance on alcohol, and it's pretty unique to our church just because we know where a lot of our congregants come from, right? But no matter what, like, it always is like marijuana, it's literally the devil's lettuce. It's the devil. You cannot have, like, it's bad. But alcohol doesn't have that same track record, even though it has a statistically worse track record when it comes to like deaths and relations to like abuse in the home and stuff like that. So why do we put so much of an emphasis on a drug or a substance like marijuana, and not so much, and as a body of the church, not necessarily our church, but as like the American church?
Yeah.
Why do we put so much of a more emphasis on marijuana over alcohol?
Yeah. So I'll speak for our church first of all. We don't believe in drinking. We don't believe if you do that, it's between you and the Lord. The Bible's clear about not being drunk, not being under the control of it. And we don't encourage that at all, right? We don't teach that it's okay for you to drink, and as long as whatever we preach, it's better to avoid it, because today sometimes it could just be one that opens the door to wanting a little bit more, and then there's people that actually struggle with alcoholism, which is an actual condition where you already have a predisposition to want more, once you try alcohol. So yeah, in our church, that's our position as far as that, and of course against marijuana as well, because of its hurtful effects on the way it's normally used. Like, we're talking about a different use right now. We're talking about medical use. But the reason the church is so against these things is because we do see its harmful effects on people. When people become dependent on those things to be able to cure, quote unquote, which is not actually a cure, things that can be helped the majority, and we have to be clear about this. We're talking about treatment. We're talking about very minority people that might use this for true medical purposes. And if a doctor proves it, prescribes it, and is something that can be used to help you with a physical ailment that you're going through, you're recuperating from a surgery or something like that, that's fine, but we're talking about the majority use of this is not even medical. It's recreational, right? It's recreational, and it's the whole purpose is to get high and to be able to change your mindset and get your mind off things that you could actually address with the help of the Holy Spirit as Christians, that we could actually heal or come to a healing from or to. And today, even the secular world, I just saw a commercial this week where they're promoting to the teens, and saying, hey, you have to be careful about marijuana use because it's so popular, but it is affecting their way of thinking, their memory loss, and all the things. You always have to remember the medical community is sort of a little bit behind always with these things. For so long, cigarettes were the thing, it was popular and everything. They were fine until now we're pretty clear that it causes cancer. So, and when I've gone to my mom's cancer checkups, the doctors always tell us it's like, because I've seen teenagers walk in there and to the cancer clinic, and they're like, I'm like, wow, they're so young. And so it's the use of marijuana, it's the use of that, and also the vaping. It's causing cancer in a lot of younger people today too. And so we have to understand that there's a medical use where it's controlled, where it's administered by a doctor who's going to supervise your use and make sure you're not addicted to it or not become dependent on it. And then we're talking about recreational use, which is not what the Bible would not agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So then it comes, and I'm still going back to the idea of it being socially unacceptable, social controversy, right? At least within the church, because the next comparison I want to bring up is opioids, and obviously, like we all know, opioids will kill you. Opioids are not good in high doses and should be only used when properly prescribed by a doctor, legitimately prescribed by a doctor. Yeah. Just a note: if you struggle with any drugs or opioids, listener, please seek help. You deserve to be like you are God. You are God's creation. You should be alive. You should survive. Yeah. Go see someone. But talking about opioids, the church, I have not heard, does not talk nearly enough about opioids and the use of opioids compared to marijuana. Marijuana is it has like the devil's lettuce, the nickname devil's lettuce, but because yes, it has affected people's minds. It undoubtedly has affected people's minds, but it also, statistics will tell you that it hasn't been a direct cause of someone's death, unlike opioids and also the aforementioned alcohol. So why hasn't the church talked about not using opioids and instead has only talked about you shouldn't take weed pills?
Yeah. I think the reason is very clear. It's because of how common that is and who you minister to. Of course, when you come with someone who's actually on opioids, the church actually sometimes is not as well equipped as ministries who are dedicated to that. Italo comes to mind. Italo was on very heavy drug use. Hermano Delmar was on very heavy drug use. We're talking about opioids. We're talking about cocaine. We're talking crack. All that stuff that sometimes, they do need a rehab center. They need a place where they can actually be detoxed and be controlled. And of course, we are not a detox center. We can help the spirit. We can help you with the inside problem, but not with the physical problem. And sometimes that's where we have to delegate that to a ministry, which will do both. That will teach you with the scriptures, the things you need to be able to overcome the addiction, but also be able to go through the withdrawal and learn how to kick the habit with those things. So that's the reason why the church doesn't do it, because it's not as common. I mean, honestly, it's not as common. It's within the people we minister to. While when it comes to alcohol, when Smoking. It comes to what's it called, marijuana, it's definitely much more available, and it's definitely much more in the everyday lives of people, our teenagers. It's available. It's totally available. Accessible. It's not that it's not available. The other things are not available, but it's definitely what people are struggling more with. And here's another reason too, and that there's a reason why these are called gateway drugs, because it usually won't start with someone just trying fentanyl or trying any of those opioids. It usually starts with what? With marijuana use. It usually starts with the lower effect drugs, which then gives you a high, but then after a while it doesn't take you as high as before. And therefore you need something stronger, something that will give you a bigger high. So that's why the church makes more emphasis on those two, because they are much more available, and they're also much more they're the gateway drug that will help you get to the other things. So you can start avoiding those.
Okay. Do we want to start talking about the mental needs part of it?
Sure, Esther, start us off. I talk too much.
I mean, I'll start by saying it's a topic where seriousness is needed, and I always just think about what Pastor used to tell us is you always have to find the root of the problem when it comes to mental health, what it is, because then you can find the remedy, right? So I think that in most cases, no assistant is needed. It's sitting down, and if the person is willing to do their part of counseling, Bible, like doing their part with, whoever they're working with, more than likely you're not going to need any assistance to that, right? Any drug assistance, right, for the mental health. If I had to say something, I would say maybe a very small percentage would need some kind of assistance, and I would want the pastor or whoever who's doing the biblical counseling, I would think that they would have to agree with that. You know what I mean? Like, for me, that's like last on the list, and I don't even know of a case in my head right now where that would be needed and I'm thinking of a person who is a believer, right? If they don't go through the biblical steps of when you're in a challenging place in your life dealing with mental health, there are biblical steps you need to go through. If you go through those biblical steps, I believe that the Lord and the Holy Spirit will help you. Not to say you're not that little percentage that might need help, but I believe that the Word and God will help you through that. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen in a day. It's work. And I know as humans, we don't like to do the work. It's making yourself vulnerable. It's a lot. But if you're willing to do that and really, truly wanting that from the Lord, I believe you can do it without any drugs.
I think you hit it right on the nail, Esther. When it comes to the inner man, and I use that term very importantly because that's what the Bible teaches. And in Philippians, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and it says that you may be strengthened in the inner man through Christ, because we go through a lot of crises in life. When we think about trauma, when we think about pain, when we think about abuse, emotional abuse, and otherwise physical, sexual, anything that harms that inner man, we have to be clear about something. This is not new. Humanity has had to deal with this for ages and ages. Sin has been around since the Garden of Eden. And abuse and trauma has been around since forever. And I would almost argue we all have some type of trauma. We all have things that we have to overcome. So when Christ came, he came to heal us, it says, from our hurts, from our pains, Isaiah 53, through his stripes we are healed, right? And when it comes to that, I think that's very crystal clear. Today's society, I'm afraid, today thinks they are very exclusive to their pains, that they are going through something that humanity's never gone through. And therefore they found the solution through pills and everything. And like you said, I agree. I totally agree. I think there's a small percentage of people that may actually have an imbalance in their brain chemistry that can be helped through something, and that should come from an actual doctor, an actual person that will prescribe you and help you to find the right balance and everything to get you to a point where you feel normal, where you feel functional, where you feel okay. But beyond that, I believe today things are prescribed so much for depression, for anxiety, for all these things, which the Bible talks about clearly about what the solution is. It's a spiritual solution. It's something about learning how to cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you, casting all your anxieties upon him. Do not be anxious, and I've seen that, and that's why as a pastor I'm so strong about that, because I've seen people go from anxiety to health. I've seen people go from depression to health, and at the same time I've seen people go into counseling, they call it. I mean, what do they call it? They call it therapy, and just become worse because they give them all this medicine that just messes with their chemistry in their brains, and they don't ever come to a point of victory or overcoming their pain and their trauma. Instead, they become this victim that everybody's fault, and all they do is basically just what I would call modern lobotomy, because back in the day people would just hurt this certain places in the brain just because they found out that it makes someone that was crazy become calm. right? And that's what we're doing with medicines today. We're just throwing things in there to see whatever makes you calm, but you're not really dealing with the issue. In that sense of the lobotomy, it was an actual dysfunction in the brain lobe that needed to get attention. You know, today we have better medicine for actual brain issues that are going on. But back then it would just be a quick fix, right? Lobotomize them. And of course now we know that's wrong. But we're sort of doing the same thing with our emotional and our spiritual issues. We're just lobotomizing people by making them calm, by making them sort of calm, because it doesn't actually help. That's why there's all these pills say if you might become depressed, you become more depressed if you do this, or call someone if you feel like you have suicidal thoughts and all that stuff. So it's something that we really don't understand. We're dealing with chemistry in our brains, and I think it's just based on some reactions, and it's when as Christians we have a better source when it comes to counseling, when it comes to emotional things, when it comes to how we view ourselves, lack of self-esteem, when it comes to identity issues, which I think is a lot to do with the people's hurts today. It's just a lack of identity. We have the source, which is Jesus Christ. We have the doctor that can heal that part. And I, like I said, I do believe that's where, as far as these pills and stuff, we have to be very, very careful. I think first start with the spiritual, start with counseling, start with getting right with the Lord and everything. Try all that, you know. And then if still there's issue, if you're walking with the Lord, you're believing in the Lord and everything, and you still have some issues, then consider it as a possibility to have something in your chemistry that is wrong that might be helped with a medicine. But start with the spiritual, I believe. So I can preach forever.
I think that there is somewhere of a difference. I don't know. It feels like there is a... I'm trying to find the right words for what I'm trying to say. I'll put it as a question. For people who have anxiety and depression, maybe it's not a clinical thing. Maybe it's not a chemical, something that's wrong with the chemicals in their brain. Maybe it is something that has been put on them through their trauma or through what their social circumstances are. Would it be better for them to live in misery and possible inaction if they have no assistance? Or should they be able to use that assistance, of course, when properly prescribed by a doctor, and make a life and potentially actually start going on the path of making those spiritual changes for themselves?
What you're saying is B leads to C leads to A. And no, it's A leads to B leads to C. Start with the actual root. Go seek counseling. You just assumed it's a person who is a believer and that wants to knows that they need counseling. Start with that. Start with counseling. Start with dealing with those issues, with the traumas, with those things, biblical changing of your thoughts. I shared a verse lately which says, you know, as a man thinketh, he is. It's really changing the way we think about ourselves and how we see ourselves and how we view ourselves, and our sense of value, our sense of worth, our sense of purpose, our sense of security, which is all is parts of our identity that needs to get righted first before you can actually consider all those other things. And like I said, you have to do it in the right order, because like I said, if you come to a point where there is a medicine that needs to be used, that's going to become after you discard all the other possibilities, right? But
get through the rest of the possibilities.
Get through all the other possibilities. But today, like I said, and I would argue this because I like debates. Show me someone who's actually is a success story in that
without the biblical.
And I say what you will find is a lot of people that are on this. You know, all you do is calm them, but you people never
who just need to continuously take the
you never have healing. You just have prescribing. You just have a band-aid,
a treatment,
but you don't have a healing to that. And I believe that I would hope that everybody's goal would be healing, to find healing. And even then, I don't know, Esther, you know, we've gone through things in our childhood and the Lord has healed us of them. Doesn't mean there's no scars. It doesn't mean you pretend it doesn't, like it never happened, or it just goes away.
It doesn't take away the trauma. It just...
or the drama.
But it helps. It just helps you overcome, and you still have moments where those trauma comes in your the triggers totally.
Yes.
And as I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago, it's what you do with it. Like everyone has stuff that they go through. It's what you do it. Do you do it biblically or do you do it your way? And I'm speaking about believers specifically because for whatever reason, as you guys were talking, it reminded me when, in a podcast, one of the first ones, I think, when we were talking about how, for whatever reason, believers think mental health is separate from the spiritual. And they don't believe that the biblical is going to help you. And that's the error at hand, in my opinion. I think many people believe that it's the therapist, it's God first, and for whatever reason we believe, and I'm sure I have my moments as well, I'm human, that it's separate. Like you can separate the spiritual from your emotional mental health, where it's not. Like if you look at your Bible, there are people prophets who wanted to kill themselves. It's nothing new. It's what you do with it. Like, do you let the Lord guide you and help you, or do you do it on your own, separate from the biblical, separate from the power of the Lord and the Holy Spirit, who can give you what you need, and go the secular way, which, as Pastor was saying, it can help you by taking, I think even psychologically, just taking the pill. I think mentally you're like, oh, I feel better already by just taking that pill. But it doesn't get to the root of the problem. And I think that's something that we miss when we decide to separate the spiritual from the social, emotional, mental. But as we started with the pyramid, you yourself said, it's all connected. And the spiritual is number one. So this is why it doesn't work when we go, secular instead of spiritual first, because the spiritual actually hones down on the root of the problem.
Yeah. This verse came to mind when you were talking, Esther, and I think it hits it on the nail. It says, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. And I think that's where it all starts, where we sort of think that God is not enough, that God is not enough for our inner man. I'm not applying this to the physical. There are physical things that need doctors, and that's why God gave us medicine. And we talked about that in the first part, right? But right now we're talking about the inner man. And when it comes to the spiritual, God died to give us healing, to give us a way out, to be able to trust that he's able to make us whole again. That's what Isaiah 53 says. But it all starts where we say we don't want to, God's not enough. We know better. Doctors know better, psychiatrists know better, and therefore we do things that end up harming ourselves more. A couple of verses too I just want to lay out there. 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. We all struggle with the same things, and people have struggled with these things. It says, but God is faithful, that he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. And in the realm of medicine, physical, that may be a medicine, God helps you. But in the realm of spiritual, God has already provided a way for you to weigh out without you putting in medicines into your brain that you don't exactly know how they're going to affect you, or might actually make you worse. I don't want to mention names, but I know people that have had to go from one medicine to another medicine to another medicine to another medicine given by a psychiatrist, because it makes them worse. Sometimes it makes them anxious, it makes them and it's been horrible. And then I've seen how, as they've grown spiritually, they've become less and less dependent on that pill or pills in order to become whole. And the second verse is 2 Corinthians 10:5. It says, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. And we have to do that. We have to say, Lord, I believe you. I want you to heal me. And if part of that is going to be going to a doctor, because at the end of the day, I realize there is an imbalance, there's something that a doctor can help me, great. But start with laying it all before the Lord, seeking help in the spiritual, seeking help in counseling, for your emotional, for your your pain, your trauma, and understand that that's not beyond God's scope of reach to heal you.
And I think that we're coming to the point where we can close, but I do want to bring in. I think it's kind of a stretch, but I'll bring it home. In Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiastes quite often talks about how there's nothing new under the sun. But at the same time, the Bible does talk about how we are unique. We are the masterworks of the potter, right? We are the clay and God is a potter, and if we can understand God in one way, we just know that he is not a mass production shop. Meaning that there has to be something unique about each and every one of us, and we can observe that in our own personalities. People like Esther always talks about how like there's an A type and a B type kind of person. Like one person's more assertive, one person's more kind of like friendly and lofty, and both of them have the strengths, but that's one of the aspects on how someone can be unique. So how can nothing be new under the sun, but also everything be unique? Well, it just means that one thing is very individual. One thing is very like the uniqueness of an individual is just that it is an individual thing. But the problems that we face, the things that we have to deal with, that nothing is new, even though your specific need, your specific problem, your specific like the problem that you have specifically can feel new to you. And it is unique. But there's also always a way for us to get through it, and it is through Christ. It is through God.
I'll answer it with this analogy. We're unique because God is a creative God, and he creates us very uniquely, and we praise the Lord for that. Sort of like cars, I would hate to be a designer for a car, because I mean, how many years of cars have we had already on Earth? 110. And there's going to be a time where it's like you run out of ideas how to design a car. You want it to look sleek, you want it to look this way, and they're always coming out with, and some are botched ideas, completely like boxed cars, and like people don't tend to go for boxed cars anyways. But people are always trying to redesign the car to make it look cool and new and great, but they all will suffer from the basic same things that are going to go wrong with it, whether it's a flat tire, whether it's an engine burning out, whether it's an electric engine or a gas engine. There's going to be different or commonalities to the things and the problems that we face, and the solution's always the same. Where do you take it?
The mechanic.
To the person who's actually knows how to deal with that. And even better, the designer. I think, of course, we have different dealership, places we can take them today, but honestly, if I could afford it, of course, the person who would be most qualified to solve any problem with my 2007 Camry would be Toyota, because they designed it. They are the designers. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind when it comes to who made you and who created you, with all unique factors. There are going to be very common problems we all face, and the Lord, our designer, knows how to deal with those, because he is the creator and he is the healer. He is our physician.
If it's cold, he will be our heater.
Yes, he'll be our heater too.
Any closing thoughts, Esther? No,
I think I hope it helps. I know it's a hard topic, and maybe they spawn more questions. Which, if so, send them in. That's great, and we'll keep tackling it. Thank you.
Just some kind of final thoughts, because we were talking about mental health and also physical health. If you are, we're not doctors. We're not physicians or anything like that. If you have, and we also. Pastor is a biblical counselor, but if you are struggling with mental health issues, please talk to someone. Like we mentioned before, it's important to that you seek that help that you need. Don't let that pain that you're dealing with immobilize you from being able to seek the proper help that you need. Speak to a trusted loved one. Speak to a counselor, a biblical counselor, preferred. But we're a church. And if you're here in Castro Valley, we'd love to have you. And I'm sure that there would be someone here, whether it's pastor, whether it's one of our deacons. We would love to talk to you about what's going on. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and it's going to be difficult if it's done alone. So again, thank you. And if you want to submit a question of your own, we would love to hear it. Like Pastor said, it's awesome when we get questions in, and you can submit your own question at www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots. The link will also be in the description of the podcast or of this video. Also, if you want to listen to the rest of our episodes, we have talked about therapy before. We have talked about drug assistance as well. I believe we've talked about those before. I don't have quite the memory of which episodes those are, but if you want to find those episodes, they're going to also be there at the website www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots. Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you join us again in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Deeper Roots. If you want to submit a question, follow up on something we talked about on the podcast, or you want to find us online, you can go to our webpage, which is ibbvn.org/deeperroots. Deeper Roots is a ministry of Iglesia Bíblica Baptista Vida Nueva, which is a local church in Castro Valley, California. And you can learn more about us and our church by going to our website, ibbvn.org.